Today is Inauguration Day for the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. A new tribal chairman and tribal council are being sworn into office. In many ways, the elections and this ceremony mirror those of the state and federal government. However, there are also many reminders here that the Leech Lake Band is a nation and a culture unto itself. Ojibwe, Chippewa, Anishinaabe, different names for one people, and at Leech Lake, one tribe, bound together by common history, land, and traditions. In his inaugural address, new chairman Archie LaRose invokes a key cultural value when he emphasizes respect for tribal elders.
Go on your way and be good to your elders and help them out any way you can.
For the Ojibwe, the past serves to anchor, guide, and sustain the future. The wisdom inherent in the very old, and the hope inborn in the very young. One teaches the other, and the circle closes, preserving a rich and distinctive cultural tradition. It is a culture rooted to nature's bounteous generosity and vibrant beauty.
They kept saying, there's not many of you in the world anymore that know how to do this. And that's when I realized what I actually know how to do here.
A culture equally capable of boisterous self-expression and great humility.
It's a gift that we have, and the reason why we have it is to share it with our fellow people.
A culture with the strength to endure the trials of history.
When I was taken to the boarding schools, I felt like I was kidnapped. I felt I was virtually just stripped away from all that I loved.
And the strength to heroically resurrect the foundations of their own identity.
We belong here. We came from here, and our language gives us a way to express that, to understand it, to communicate it in ways that don't translate into other languages.
If we lose the language, we lose our Indianness, the connectedness we have to this being Indian.
Basically, makes me feel more whole as a person.
And I think it's so sad that if we can't feel that, if we're out of touch with that, that's probably why our people that are hurting, that's why.
If our kids really understood the strength of the things we were gifted, there would nothing would stop us from anything they wanted to do, anything.
If there is one place on the Leech Lake Reservation that embodies the timelessness of Anishinaabe culture, it is the Meday Cemetery in Mission. Here, spirit houses have been erected to shelter departed friends and relatives during their final journey. Some are maintained with tokens and offerings. Others are slowly returning to the earth. And yet, despite any outward appearance of dereliction, they mark an ending and a beginning, like the seasons themselves. And as the spring breezes that herald rebirth whisper between the wooden markers, the connection between Ojibwe traditions and the natural world is palpable.
In the spring, Everybody had their jobs to do. And what our major project would be is making maple sugar, maple syrup, maple sugar cakes. We used to walk out in the woods. We move out there for however long the trees ran. And I remember my uncle carried me on his back through the swamp till we got over there. Otherwise, we all walked. I don't even know how far it was. About 5 miles, maybe.
It was hard work, for one thing, because you have to go get the sap poured. We work all evening to collect the sap.
Cans are running 2 by 2, you know, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, you know. So they had a lot of sap.
And then when they get enough, then my grandma would boil it all day till you get maybe a gallon.
You know, old people started when, about 4 o'clock in the morning. They started boiling sap, and they really go at it, you know. They boil till 4 till whatever, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, somewhere around, and they get done, you know.
Maple sugar is still an important staple for the Leech Lake Ojibwe. On this day, Gilbert Moose recites a prayer of thanksgiving for these trees. Holding tobacco, a traditional offering of appreciation and respect, he speaks his native language, Ojibwe Moan. Gilbert has brought a group of local students to the woods in order to share these skills and this important part of the Ojibwe heritage with a new generation. His prayer includes an origin story, an explanation of how maple sugar first came to the Ojibwe people.
Long time ago, in the beginning, when we first found these here maple trees, there was a lady that was walking to the next camp. She got tired. She sat down on a rock. Something kept on dripping on her head. She took her hand and went like that, and it tasted good to her. So she ran back and told whoever she can talk to that she had found something that they can survive on. So they had a little crew that went out there to see what she was talking about, and finally they found out these trees gave life.
Once thanks have been given, the students are issued the necessary equipment for tapping the trees. Other than some modern materials, these tools and the methods used for harvesting and processing the sap have remained largely unchanged since the days of their forebears. Gilbert demonstrates the basic techniques.
You go at an angle like that, up like that.
He begins by drilling 1.5 to 2 inches into a mature tree. After drilling, he's careful to clean any shavings out of the hole.
Otherwise it'll plug your spigot.
Finally, he sets the tap and rigs a system for collecting the sap.
For me, I use a nail. You hang your can, and as soon as you put it on there, it should drip.
As the students put these methods into practice, they are doing more than repeating an annual springtime gathering rite. They are experiencing the Ojibwe's profound connection with the land firsthand. Although these young people may never depend upon these trees for their survival, they now have an understanding and an appreciation for how their ancestors literally drew life from nature. For centuries, these maples have sustained the Leech Lake Ojibwe. And as the students depart, their efforts reveal the timeless rhythm within these trees. The dripping sap measures the life force of the forest, like the ticking of a clock. Or a pulsing heartbeat. Or living percussion. Music is an important social and spiritual component of Ojibwe culture, and the drum is the centerpiece of this art form. Coupled with singing, it is a powerful instrument for expressing Ojibwe identity and traditions. This drum group is made up of individuals of all ages and from throughout the reservation. Fittingly, they call themselves Leech Lake Nation.
Our drum is like the heartbeat of our people. It was with me very young. My father and my uncles, they sang. They had their own drum group.
The first memory of a drum I remember is I must have been 3 years old or so, maybe younger, sitting by the drum. And my grandpa wouldn't let me pound on the drum at first because I didn't know how, but he had me stand there. And my grandpa would sing every single morning. He'd wake up 5 o'clock in the morning and he'd start pounding on his drum and start singing. And well, my grandpa was my hero. So that's something I always wanted to be like him. I always wanted to sing like him. I always wanted to have a voice like him.
Because this music is so uniquely tied to their culture, it is easy for an outsider to assume that the Ojibwe are singing in another language. In fact, the majority of native songs are comprised of vocables, sounds that emphasize form and feeling, rather than words with specific meaning.
When we sing, it's mostly vocables. That's what they call a straight song. And that's just mostly all vocables, everything is, you might hear away, ha, ya, or something like that, Remember that song?
Yeah.
While some songs are nothing more than expressions of exuberant emotion, others command great respect and are reserved for serious purposes and ceremonies. Their meanings range from tribute to prayer.
The real spiritual songs, some of those songs have Ojibwe words in there, and those are powerful songs. We don't screw around with them ones.
Those word songs, you don't sing them if you don't know what those words are and what those words, what that song means.
The big drum ceremonies, those are done in the spring and in the fall. Usually have a ceremony in the spring and the fall. Those are collecting medicine from the creation to let you make it through the winter, assurance that you make it through the summer, and then the one in the fall, you're making sure you make it through the winter. It's like buying something to keep yourself well. It's like being the doctor ahead of time. That's about how it works.
In the days before recordings, drum music and songs existed solely in the memories of the musicians. Even today, there are no written notes. Like wisdom itself, and like so many other Ojibwe traditions, these songs are passed from one generation to another.
You learn these songs by listening and joining in. There's something that you can't learn overnight. It takes years. We consider ourselves, when we sit down in that circle, we're all brothers, like a family, and those young fellas are well respected. They sing hard.
I'm blessed to be there while it's happening, and these young guys are going to be great singers when they get old. You know, they're going to be really, really great. They're going to be something to see, something to hear, something to dance to.
Perhaps the most familiar venues for drum music and singing on the Leech Lake Reservation are the general powwows.
This is our 10th annual celebration here in Battle Point.
These colorful events, which often occur on holidays or mark other significant occasions throughout the year, are part social gatherings, part cultural celebrations.
Beautiful afternoon to dance.
General powwow is just like you and your wife going to a ball or a dance, dance hall, dancing, having a good time. That's a general powwow.
Because I'm such a young person, there's a lot of people who are more qualified to speak than I am. But in my thoughts, I think that the singing and the dancing is a celebration of life. It's our way of celebrating, going out and having a good time, going to cut loose. Because I see a lot of people having good times out there. They're enjoying themselves, they're working up a sweat, and they're living life. Just enjoying it.
My husband is non-Indian, and one time we had gone to a powwow, and when we went home, he said, something, I noticed something. He said, I kind of enjoy going to powwows. I like seeing people we know. It's kind of fun to visit, and it's always beautiful to watch it. But he said, you know what, I can just tell by looking at your face, you feel something, and I don't feel that. And he said, do you know what I mean? And I said, yeah, I do, but I could never explain it to you. One of the things I know I feel when I'm at a powwow is when we're coming into grand entry and we're dancing, and the music and the drums and the dancers, and I feel, oh my God, we're such a beautiful people. And what I mean is spiritually beautiful. This is the beauty of our people. It's not just our regalia and what we're wearing. It's really an awesome feeling to feel entirely uplifted by who we are.
Summertime, we would right away, plow the gardens, plant. And we had huge, huge gardens. And we lived right by the river that was going into Leech Lake. And we had to carry water to water the gardens, like in the summertime when it was hot.
We hauled our own water in the lake. We washed our own clothes by hand. We had our own potatoes. We had carrots, rutabaga. We fished.
We picked berries. We used to can at least 100 quarts, but then we we ate, I think, more than we picked.
We live off the land. We didn't go to the store maybe once or twice a year.
This land, the source of the Mississippi River, and for the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, the source of great beauty and great bounty. Life-giving earth, plants, and animals intimately connected to their identity and their culture. It is a wellspring of economic and spiritual strength.
The land is so important. The land is where our spiritual roots come from. And I think that the first teachings, the very first teaching that a young Anishinaabe should have is, who are you in relationship to this land? Everything else then is insignificant. Once you're anchored to that belief, then you could travel this world and be whoever you want to be, and you'll have a solid sense of who you are. You'll have a solid understanding, a deep understanding of your relationship with this planet that we call Mother Earth.
And yet, for the Leech Lake Ojibwe, their tribal lands have also been a source of seesawing fortune and controversy. Some has been positive. The Indian Gaming Act of 1988 opened the door for construction of unprecedented engines for economic growth and self-sufficiency.
We have 3 very strong gaming operations. The gaming division provides the band with roughly 10 to 12 million annually, depending on what their adjusted net revenues are. Those go into programs and services for our people.
On the other hand, time and again over the last century, outside pressures and forces have whittled away at the Ojibwe's precious land resources. Today, the Leech Lake Band holds the smallest percentage of its reservation of any Minnesota tribe.
The Leech Lake Reservation was created by a number of treaties. The first treaty was signed with Ojibwe in 1855, and then there were a number of subsequent treaties, and finally a couple of executive orders were passed that created the exterior boundaries of the Leech Lake Reservation. Within that reservation, there's approximately 660,000 acres of land. At that time, all the land belonged to the Leech Lake Ojibwe.
And then, of course, the history of the Leech Lake people changed in 1908 when the federal government took 600,000 acres of land from us and renamed it the Minnesota National Forest because of the need for lumber. A lot of the lumber used to build the city, Minneapolis, Chicago, came right here from the Minnesota National Forest at that one time, or what we refer to right now as the Chippewa National Forest. It's about 660,000 acres, and it's right smack in the middle of our reservation. So that has really taken quite a bite out of our land base.
During the late 19th century, the federal government instituted policies to shift tribal lands from collective to private ownership, and to open reservation land and resources to non-Indians. In particular, the Nelson Act of 1889 had profound consequences for the Leech Lake Ojibwe.
The Nelson Act basically said that each tribe member would get an 80-acre allotment of land, and then all the other lands would be opened up to settlement, to either homesteading or logging.
The Bureau of Indian Affairs promised the Ojibwe compensation in the form of health services, education, housing, equipment for farming, but very little of this ever materialized. Furthermore, by reapportioning Indian land into privately owned allotments, the Nelson Act undermined Ojibwe communal traditions and ways of living.
Prior to the Nelson Act, the whole 660,000 acres within the boundaries of the Leech Lake Reservation was owned collectively by all the Ojibwe that lived here. Nobody owned one parcel of land or one portion of land. It was all owned collectively.
Suddenly, every Ojibwe was a private landowner. But too often, the land allotted was remotely located or unsuitable for farming. And this opened the door for Indians to act upon an utterly foreign concept, the temptation or need to sell their land.
Many people look at the land as real estate. And when I see the land, I see Mother Earth. How much of my mother do you want to buy? That's the way the real question should be.
For all these reasons, it soon became clear that land allotments for the Leech Lake Ojibwe had actually been a land grab.
And they decided that they had been hoodwinked by the government and by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they had a number of meetings around the reservation where they pulled all the tribe members in, and they decided that they were going to go back and try to lobby Congress to give them all their land back. Said we don't want allotments anymore. We want all of our land back, and but of course that didn't happen.
Another disastrous consequence of the Morris Act was the state's assertion that treaty rights given to the Leech Lake Band to hunt, fish, and gather on reservation lands no longer applied. Unwilling to bow to this position, the Ojibwe eventually fought the state in court.
It was very tense here. The non-Indians here and all the resort owners and everybody really felt that if our tribe members got back their hunting and fishing and gathering rights, that we were going to wipe out all the resources. You know, that there'd be unfettered netting, shooting deer anytime they wanted. So they were totally opposed to Leech Lake Reservation getting their hunting and fishing and gathering rights back.
Ultimately, the court sided with the band, and in 1972, the state negotiated a settlement that recognized the hunting, fishing, and gathering rights of the Leech Lake Ojibwe. For its part, the reservation created a division of resource management to oversee and administer the tribe's access to these precious resources.
Under the Division of Resource Management, we have 13 programs. We've got a forestry program, we've got wildlife biologists, we've got fisheries biologists, we've got an archaeology program, we've got our tribal historic preservation officer, we've got botanists that look out for our traditional use plants, and we've got a number of environmental programs. We also sell hunting and fishing licenses to our tribe members under the Division of Resource Management. All of those programs are geared toward protecting the natural resources on the Leech Lake Reservation.
What would you like, dear? I'm going to do hamburger. There you go, kiddo.
Although tribal initiatives like these have done much to ease the concerns of non-Indians, future coexistence and prosperity on the Leech Lake Reservation depend more upon another basic tenet of Ojibwe culture: mutual understanding and respect.
The relationship between the resort owners, local business owners, and the tribe today is, I think, very good. I think they all realize, we realize, the resort owners, Department of Commerce, communities realize that we got to work together for the future to look at not only economic development, but also to protect the resources.
The Walker Hill dig site is located on a wooded rise near the southwest corner of the reservation. Here, archaeologists from the Leech Lake Heritage Sites program have unearthed artifacts that may be nothing more than glacially worked pebbles and stones, or they may be the earliest evidence of native people in North America.
The Leech Lake Heritage Sites program is a for-profit cultural resources management firm owned by the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. When there is any type of ground disturbing activity that involves federal funding or permitting of any kind, an archaeological survey has to be conducted to identify any cultural properties that might be within the proposed construction area. So initially, the first thing that we do is we walk over the surface and we look for surface features such as structural ruins, possible burials, anything that we can see on the surface. And we also conduct shovel testing, where we will dig a hole and we screen it through 1/4-inch hardware mesh. And we look for any prehistoric or historic artifacts. If we find any, then we have to evaluate the significance of the site.
21 DL 247.
The majority of our staff are Leech Lake tribal members or Ojibwe tribal affiliates who have worked in the program for many years. As Native Americans, their identity is tied so closely with their past, their history, their heritage. So for them to be able to be directly involved in identifying, understanding, preserving, and protecting their cultural heritage is an amazing opportunity for not only them, but for archaeology in general.
The word Anishinaabe means the first people, and at Walker Hill, the archaeologists may have found proof that this is literally true. In 2004, the team began excavating a rectangular depression they interpreted as a historic house pit, perhaps a trapper's cabin from the fur trade era.
When the crew was out there doing their excavations, they quickly realized that this house pit was actually a 1960s era children's play fort with cap gun, orange crush bottle top. But they dug deeper below that to make sure that there was nothing else down there in the undisturbed soil deposits. They were in the last level and they found a stone waste flake.
In the same layer, the team found larger stones suggestive of primitive chopping tools. Evidence of prehistoric people is not uncommon on the Leech Lake Reservation, but no one has ever found it where the archaeologists discovered these, in soils some scientists have estimated are 13 to 15,000 years old.
Most scientists believe that humans weren't here until at least 12,000 years ago. So if they are indeed artifacts in these deposits that are that old, it could rewrite the prehistory of the entire continent.
In the fall, ricing was the major thing in the fall because it's the only time that Native peoples had a chance to make some money because you could sell the rice.
The rice was only about 15 cents a pound, green rice. But we thought that was a lot of money.
I don't know how old my grandparents were, but they used to go out there. And by noon, they would come in with the boat full. And they would empty it onto tarps and go back out again and come home in the evening and with another boatload.
So you do that, but you'd also save plenty of rice for you to eat for the whole next year that will last you until the next fall.
Wild rice, called manoman in the Ojibwe language, is a food staple uniquely tied to Indian history and culture, and it continues to play an important economic role on the Leech Lake Reservation. For these reasons, it is revered by the Ojibwe.
The history of the Ojibwe people, it talks about a migration from the east. The stories that are told talked about a plant that grew in the water that the Creator had told the Ojibwe who were living on the East Coast that they needed to move to the west, and that they would discover this water plant, and that would be a source of food, and that's where they would make their home.
Like the making of maple sugar, the tools and techniques for harvesting wild rice have changed little in centuries. At the Buganagishig School, students young and old, assisted by reservation elders, learn these cultural traditions in addition to their academic studies. It is a far cry from just a few generations ago, when a primary objective of educating Indian children was to wipe away their cultural identity.
I was taken away from this reservation in 1933. 4 years old, and went to a military boarding school. And it was very devastating for me.
My mother was one of those children that were taken from her home in Sugar Point, and she was beaten at a mission school, or she called it a sister school. And she was beaten there because she was speaking her language.
And it's a similar experience, I think, that a lot of our grandparents, our parents, went through going away to boarding school, the forced language loss, the forced assimilation that our people experienced.
Anything that was about the Ojibwe people was denied. And that was the duty of that school, was to see if they could transform our way of thinking, our way of living, our thought process into being non-Indian.
Me goyak gizis among, gizis among, gizis among. Me goyak gizis among, gimenomenon. Oh, you guys are good. Give yourselves a pat on the back.
The Buganagishig School was started as an expression of our right to determine our educational priorities here at the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe.
Our tribal school was based on the desire to inspire our young people about who they are as Anishinaabe young people.
It has always been the goal from the beginning, from the very beginning of the school, to have a strong Ojibwe language and cultural base within the school, and weaving that in with all of the regular required academic work.
And if you're really glad to be an Indian, say Enange Anishinaabe Endao. Every day they live their culture. If they go to school here, they live it. You know, it's here. We're surrounded by their culture, with the language and the drum and dance. Elders, we've got elders that are here all the time. And these kids know that this school is for them. This school was made especially for them. They belong here. They just know they belong.
The tribal school was founded in 1975 after Indian students walked out of the local high school to protest the fact that their cultural needs were being ignored.
And that was very valid at that time, and because that was what was going on across Indian country, was Indian people realizing the need to put that history, that knowledge back into the hearts and minds of our young people.
The Bug-O-Nay-Ge-Shig School is a triumphant symbol of the utter failure of the boarding school era. Even the legacy of those cruel policies is tempered by the fact that today, schools and educational programs strongly tied to Indian culture are blossoming throughout the Leech Lake Reservation.
I think of our Head Start program that serves our 3 to 5-year-olds on the reservation. We have 13 classrooms across the reservation.
We have a lot to do with the language, the counting, the animals, the phrases. You know, we introduce those. And so, you know, through the language pieces that we introduce there throughout the day, to the culture time, you know, where we'll introduce the powwow and the different dances, we have a great opportunity to really turn the page on growth and development here at Leech Lake.
I think of the higher ed facilities that we have at our tribal college.
Symbolically, there's a lot that we offer here. Our mission is about offering an excellent education that's grounded in Anishinaabe culture. And many of our students are not exposed to that enough and don't have enough of an understanding when they come to us. So we really try to work on helping them to understand our history and our culture and our ways of viewing and knowing the world, to help them gain that cultural self-confidence that they need to go on and to be productive, good citizens of our community and our nation.
For our young people, I believe it's very critical that they understand who they are as Anishinaabe and the values that go with that, the life ways of who we are as Anishinaabe people. It's not a history, it's a current modern day thing, being Anishinaabe today in the 21st century.
The Bug-O-Nay-Ge-Shig School is named for a local Ojibwe whose defiance in the face of injustice sparked the Battle of Sugar Point, a conflict that is remembered as the last battle between American Indians and the U.S. Army. Historians have termed it an uprising, but the Ojibwe have their own word to describe it.
There is a phrase and a term that in the Ojibwe language about being Ogitsida, about being a warrior, a true warrior. What is an Ogitsida? And I think that people who defend the rights of the Ojibwe people, those are the warriors. Those, whether they're men or women. But you've got to go the distance of being Anishinaabe.
In the fall of 1898, timber companies were flagrantly cheating the Indians by devaluing their timber. Adding more fuel to the fires of discontent was the practice of detaining Indian people as witnesses in criminal trials, transporting them long distances to give testimony, and then releasing them with no means of returning to their homes. The previous winter, the elderly Bug-O-Nay-Ge-Shig had been forced to walk nearly 150 miles from Duluth back to Leech Lake. When marshals attempted to arrest him again in the fall, he resisted, aided by 20 members of his band. Eventually, federal troops were ferried to Bug-O-Nay-Ge-Shig's cabin on Sugar Point, where a gun battle ensued. When the smoke cleared, 6 soldiers lay dead. William Jones, the U.S. Commissioner of Indian Affairs, summed it up this way: "The Indians were prompted to their outbreak by the wrongs committed against them and chafed under unfair treatment. They now will go back to their homes and live peaceably if the whites will treat them fairly which is very likely, as the whites were thoroughly impressed with the stand taken by the Indians. In this respect, the outbreak has taught them a lesson.
To me, Buganagizik, Crazy Horse, Chief Joseph, all stood the ground. That is Ugichida, is to protect and to preserve your way of life.
Where we came from and the struggles that took place for us to get where we are today, there was a huge commitment by somebody every step of that journey. The journey will continue, but it's important our young people understand that they have an opportunity to be a part of that journey if they so choose.
Winter, there's still a lot of work because you have to get wood, you got to split wood. You know, there's always shoveling, and that's all by hand, no machinery during those years. And that means that you shovel a path from the house to the barn, to the chicken coop, you know, down to the lake so you can get water because the pump freezes up.
We'd help my grandpa haul water and chop wood, and we had to bring the wood in when he chopped it.
I'd go for a ride with my grandpa on his horse and sleigh, and that's the part I used to like in the wintertime, is go out in the woods and watch him cut trees down, and of course I had to help a little bit, as much as I could.
Then you do all your repair work, your sewing and your bead work. My grandma used to make beautiful beadwork, and that was mostly a winter job.
Even the most skillful examples of Ojibwe beadwork typically contain one tiny flaw, deliberately incorporated by the maker, a humble statement of recognition that only God the Creator can craft true perfection. Ojibwe bead and quill work are ancient and highly prized art forms, art that developed from basic necessity.
Art years ago for the American Indian was the way they lived, and they decorated their clothing with it. They had to use what they made for daily living. But today it's turned into an art. It's a collectible art, and that's what I'm doing today. People are collecting quill work.
Across the country and around the world, clients commission Mel Losh to transform a simple laundry list of natural materials, porcupine quills, birch bark, and sweetgrass, into objects of timeless beauty.
When I start a piece, I know in my mind what I'm going to be doing, like flowers or an animal or whatever, and I start working on it, and I look at the clock, and maybe it's 9 o'clock at night, and I get so involved with it, it only seems like a few minutes later I look at the clock and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, so I get lost in it. And some pieces that I do, like I put the pattern on the birch bark, and just like the quills went in there on their own. I mean, just like I didn't have to do anything.
Humility is the hallmark of the Ojibwe artisan. The same quality that explains a single white bead in a field of green is the reason why Mel considers his art a gift rather than a talent.
And when I'm out in the public, people come up to me, and people I don't even know, but they recognize me and hear about me, and I'm starting to realize what I actually know how to do here.
started doing art as a little kid, just doing cartoons and just had the interest of sketching different things. And I didn't get serious about it until after my little girl was killed by a school bus.
After his daughter's tragic death, Punk Wakanabo rekindled his artistic passions as an outlet for his grief and as a way to fund his crusade for school bus safety awareness. Today, his prints are featured commercially and in galleries around the world. Punk uses simple dime store paints to create haunting images from Native American life, history, and culture.
This is called The Beginning. The creator is here. He's got a pipe that he's offering to the people, and smoke is coming out, twirling around, making the clouds, making the geese. All of the animals are around him, coming to life, and that smoke just swirls around him, comes down into the water where the fish, the loons, the ducks, the moose are there. So it's just like in the beginning, all of the smoke was brought by the Creator and brought a life to all these animals.
A unique feature of Punk's artwork is his practice of incorporating hidden words and animals into his paintings. This is not simply a whimsical device. Instead, it is yet another reflection of Ojibwe cultural beliefs and humility.
I usually hide an eagle someplace in my artwork, and for that reason, it's just the prayers that I say before I do art, or even thank the animals that I use, their images. I'll offer tobacco for use of their images, and that this hidden eagle will take my prayers and take it to the heavens.
The Ojibwe believe that the natural world reflects the artistry of a greater hand. In the same way, the works of Mel Losh and Punk Wakanabo reveal the inner gifts inherent in all people.
I think everyone has a talent if they look at themselves and dig inside themselves and concentrate on something that they have an interest in and put their full effort into doing something. Be it sports, be it art, be it music. It's inside everybody. All they have to do is just bring it out and concentrate on it.
One of Brady Fairbank's gifts is basketball. Years of competing against his older brothers have honed Brady's scoring average to over 30 points per game. But he also credits another influence, an important difference he sees between young people who are successful and those who struggle.
A lot of the kids that weren't involved with the culture, they were either drinking or doing drugs or weren't even in school. And then a lot of the kids that were like dancing and singing and in sports and doing good in school and going to college and doing good in life.
One key to avoiding the pitfalls of alcohol and drug abuse is the self-confidence that comes from a strong sense of identity. On the Leech Lake Reservation, young people have a unique resource to draw upon: their Indian heritage.
The dominant society would tell us we all need to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and stand alone, but in the Indian world, that's not the way we form a healthy identity. A healthy identity is from that sense of belonging. It's who I am is who my people are. Unfortunately, too many of our children are trying to do it alone, and they get in trouble. And they need us to kind of go back and help them get that strong sense of identity, who they are.
My mom got us started when we were younger, just basically getting our Indian names, knowing our clans, and trying to get in the traditional way of life, and got us dancing and singing. It's helped me become an adult, helped me be happy, basically makes me feel more whole as a person.
Ni kinawia, ni
There is no greater expression of Ojibwe identity than the language. It is why the boarding schools attempted to extinguish it forever. But today, thanks to the efforts of the Leech Lake community, the spark has been rekindled.
My grandchildren are now in immersion school, and they speak the Ojibwe language there from the minute they get there till they come home. They can't speak any English. And oh, I feel so proud of my grandkids.
The Ojibwe Language Immersion Program at the Buganagishig School is more than an academic education and more cultural education. It is the antithesis of the boarding schools. It is a place where all the strengths and traditions of being Anishinaabe can be celebrated, nurtured, and safeguarded for new generations.
Our elder Johnny Mitchell, he's one of our esteemed elders from here at the Leech Lake Reservation. Johnny Mitchell came in and he said, I think we should call this Nigane. And Nigane is the one who leads. Johnny said, the kids who come in here and learn that language and learn how to live our lives as Anishinaabe, they're going to be the leaders. They are the ones leading the way for the rest of us.
Oh my God, it makes me feel good when you hear those kids talk Ojibwe. The 4-year-olds, 5, 6, they're talking Ojibwe.
We were basically gifted a way of life that would allow us to live in a quiet way and live, people call it harmoniously with the earth and things like that. That's what we were gifted. That's what the language brings back. We remember what it is to respect, not just to talk about what respect is, but to actually live that way. That's how we teach in immersion.
Like the teachers and the tribal elders who work with them every day, students enrolled in the Nigane Ojibwe Language Immersion Program are becoming something that only a few years ago was feared might be lost forever. Fluent speakers of Ojibwe-Moan and caretakers of their own cultural identity. And so the seasons turn, the great wheel of nature. And for the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, each spoke is a connection between a proud history and new hope for the future. Hope woven from enduring threads of tradition and the accumulated wisdom of centuries, perhaps even millennia.
Life is very simple, and that's what one elder told me one time. He said, respecting one another, sharing with one another, and loving those around us. And that's the quality of human life that the Creator gave us. It's very simple.
Hope that swells in pace with the skills, opportunities, and resources of this tribe.
Today we have attorneys, we have doctors, we have educators. We have everything that the modern society could have working for us and working to better the lives of our people.
Hope that echoes from every corner of the Leech Lake Reservation. Hope that grows stronger with each new Ojibwe heartbeat.
I'm very, very happy that I'm Native American, and I'm very proud of my traditions and Anishinaabe ways.
Those ceremonies, the language, all of those things that we have here that are unique to our people. These are unique to our people. It makes us special and it will make us strong.